Welcome to the PCN Capitol Preview. I'm Francine Schertzer. Today we'll talk about the state budget. But first, we're joined by Stephen Caruso, government reporter for Spotlight PA. Thanks for joining us, Stephen.
Thanks for having me, Francine.
Your latest article details many of the budget proposals that Governor Josh Shapiro announced last week. Did anything stand out to you as being particularly innovative?
Yeah, one thing that really did surprise me is healthcare. The governor put a lot of political capital on bringing up the idea that healthcare is an issue that he sought bipartisan compromise on, and that he wanted to take action on. He threw his support, for instance, behind a Democratic House bill from State Rep Lisa Borowski from Delco, or Borowski. I should say that's what it looks like the proposal was. What she wants, what the governor wants is more reviewing of private equity acquisitions of hospitals and other healthcare businesses. So I think the hope for that is that these private companies that come out often from out of state will not be as interested in providing good care for a community. His hope was let the attorney general review it. That could lead to some results. He also called for amending insurers cover mental health care delivered to students in schools, something that apparently isn't something that's always covered. He continued to talk about the momnibus, trying to reduce maternal mortality rates for Black women in particular. He also called for codifying ACA requirements in state law. These are all things that have gotten bipartisan support too. ACA, for instance, even though that's a law we think was quite partisan at the national level, you'll find Republicans who vote for these protections, like letting your kids stay on healthcare until 26 in state legislatures. I thought that was interesting. I think that was not on my bingo card, so to speak, and I am very curious to see how that stuff moves in the General Assembly as Shapiro enters the last of his 2 years in his first term.
Many of the governor's proposals are repeats of things he asked for last year, including raising the minimum wage, legalizing recreational marijuana, taxing skills games. Has anything changed in the political environment that makes any of these initiatives more likely to pass this year since they didn't pass last year?
I mean, in some ways, no. I mean, we're coming back with the same divide in the General Assembly. House Democrats still have a one vote margin. The Senate Republicans have the same exact margin. There's one switch around the edges, which they trade a central Pennsylvania conservative member for a North Philadelphia Republican. So with that said, I mean, on the face, no, but I do feel from having been in the building, watching how swearing in day went, that there's seems to be more, okay, guys, we should find compromises when we can. I mean, for instance, Governor Shapiro has already signed two bills uh, just last week that were like run through in the first couple weeks session, and it took him until May of 2023 to sign his first bill last session. So, I think there's a lot of specifics of the issues you mentioned, from marijuana, the skill games, the road funding to whatever, that will make it hard to actually come to a deal. They still have a lot of hard work to knuckle down and get through the details of and handle warring lobbies and whatnot, but I think there's will.
What kind of reaction did the governor's proposal get from lawmakers?
For the most part, it's kind of standard operating procedure. Republicans were saying the numbers were too high. Spending is will be too big, too quick. The state does have a structural deficit. We do have a good amount of money now, but the problem is that those are one-time dollars, and there's always a concern of you can't balance a budget which is constantly needs to make sure sick people have health care and roads are paved with dollars that just are there for one single moment came in and then they don't have a recurring source. And Democrats are saying, though, look, like, we have obligations. We have things that we need to spend on. And if Republicans want to talk tough on fiscal policy, they should start pointing out the things they want to cut. It's one thing to talk generically about dollars that can't be spent, but it's another thing to also say, though, like, okay, but what do you not want to be funded? Because, I mean, I think as we're seeing at the federal level, when all of a sudden, when government enters society in this big way and starts funding things, and all of a sudden the rug is pulled out from under that, people will take notice. And it's not always politically popular.
2 years ago, the governor voiced his support for school vouchers, and then he ended up vetoing the bill. Do you think the issue of vouchers comes up again this year?
Senate Republicans are saying that they will. I mean, they've been talking about bringing it up ever since 2023, when Shapiro, seemed to agree and then vetoed it. So I don't know what it'll look like, the particulars. At this point, we have a lot of rhetoric about from school public education advocates, that the state's EITC tax credit program is a voucher by any other name. This is a tax credit to rich individuals or corporations that give money to private school scholarships. They're talking about like that's a voucher, and budget deals have historically increased that. So, I don't know if Senate Republicans are just going to, want a big increase in that, or if they're going to look for a more targeted proposal that gets at the, closer to the nature of what they want, which is like, government funded voucher program.
Governor Shapiro is expected to have national political aspirations. Was that evident in what he proposed this year?
I think that what was clear is that he was trying to, I think every speech Josh Shapiro makes has this sense of he's trying to build a narrative. He's always trying to make you feel like you're in a place and time. I mean, he has this like it feels like he ends a lot of his big speeches with this callback to Pennsylvania's history, where he likes to name drop many notable Pennsylvanians to be like, these are the people who preceded us, and it's our job to pick up their mantle. So in that sense, yes, and I look at the ideology of it. I mean, look, there's some things that I think people would say are Reaganomics in that speech, cutting corporate taxes. Other things that people would say are fire-breathing populists, calling for private equity to be taken out of healthcare. There's a wide range of policies in there. Where that ends, what policies actually get done, like how the speech turns into policy, that's going to all be done behind closed doors. And I think that's going to be the better analysis of what Josh Shapiro's, how he wants to build himself into a national figure is going to be.
Stephen Caruso, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
More of the PCN Capitol Preview after this short break. Welcome back. Our guests today are House Appropriations Committee Chairs, Representative Jordan Harris and Representative Jim Struzzi. Gentlemen, thanks both for joining us. Representative Struzzi, we'll start with you first. What stood out to you most in the governor's budget address last week?
First, let me say congratulations to Chairman Harris and the Philadelphia Eagles on an incredible performance last night. Um, Obviously, I think related to the budget, the spending number of $51.4 billion was a shock to a lot of us, I think, looking at our revenues not even coming close to meeting that level, or at least not expected to. So that was, from my perspective, shocking at first because I was hopeful that the governor would come in with a budget that a spending request that aligned more with expected revenues, and so that was I think the initial reaction. We're looking at $3.5 billion increased spending at a time when we're only expected to see revenues at about 1.3 billion. So that big gap is what concerns a lot of us, I think. Understanding, of course, that we do have obligations that we need to meet, and that we do have challenges in this Commonwealth that we do have to work together to solve. But my initial reaction was one of shock, knowing that we don't have that kind of revenue coming in and we're still looking to spend that much more money.
Representative Harris.
Let's just start with the fact that the Philadelphia Eagles won the Super Bowl last night. So,
Yeah.
listen, if you hear my voice going in and out, it's because I was on Broad Street last night, like a respectful Philadelphian should have been after that kind of victory from our birds. Go birds. Sorry. Back to the budget. Okay. Governor Shapiro put forward a document, in my view, that continues the type of investment that we've seen him do and this legislature do over the last 2 years. The investments that you'll see are investments in education, because we have a Commonwealth Court ruling that says we need to do such. Investments in housing, because most Pennsylvanians know that housing in this Commonwealth is getting expensive, and not only expensive, something that lots of folks can't afford. And investments in things like the Department of Human Services with our health care, with the care for our seniors, care for our elderly, and the care for our most vulnerable. Governor Shapiro's budget continues to double down on the investments that we've made over the last 2 years to continue to put Pennsylvania in the right direction.
Pennsylvania is expected to be facing a fiscal deficit. What, particularly with what the governor has asked for in his budget proposals, are there specific places that you would support cuts, or perhaps new revenues that you would support? Representative Harris, we'll go back to you first.
So I think what you see in the governor's budget is an opportunity to expand business. One of the things that's in the budget is an acceleration in the CNI reduction here in Pennsylvania, to make Pennsylvania a more business friendly state. Years ago, we voted on the CNI reduction, and what the governor is trying to do is accelerate that so that we can become a more business friendly state and have more businesses come in Pennsylvania. Listen, you can't cut your way out of these type of situations. Pennsylvania is a older state. We have more seniors than the states around us, right? So when you look at those kind of fiscal responsibilities, you have to grow the pot. Reducing the CNI is a way that we feel we can grow the pot.
Representative Struzzi.
Well, I think that is something that we can agree on. Our Republican caucus has been championing a reduction in the CNI for many years now. So I think that is something that we can agree on. We do need to be more attractive to businesses here in Pennsylvania. And I think that one way we can do that is to actually get government out of the way in many cases. It takes so very long to get through the red tape to even start a business, to build a building here in Pennsylvania. So we agree that government reform is one of the next steps, one of the big steps we can do to grow business in Pennsylvania. But we also think that we need some policy changes as well. And one of the big things that we think can grow our economy in Pennsylvania is energy. We know, not anecdotal, that for at least 5 years now, we have not seen capital investment in Pennsylvania because of policies like the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative and things that really do stifle business growth, business attraction. So we believe that if the governor would just simply stop pursuing the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, we would see the energy industry come back to Pennsylvania. We have literally lost billions of dollars in investment, thousands of jobs to other states that welcome energy production. And it's not just energy production, it's manufacturing, it's any industry that uses energy, and that pretty much covers everything in Pennsylvania. So we believe we can spur our economy, we can get the revenues we need to meet those challenges, to meet those obligations, as Chairman Harris outlined, by simply allowing our energy industry to thrive.
Representative Struzzi, if we can go back to something that Representative Harris mentioned just a moment ago, the governor's proposal to accelerate the reduction of the corporate net income tax would also be paired with getting rid of the Delaware loophole. Can you explain briefly what the Delaware loophole is and how the pairing of those two initiatives together might impact your caucus's willingness to support this?
I think those are discussions that we will have throughout the budget process. The governor lays out his spending plan, and the Delaware loophole is something that we need to address related to tax structures, as well as the continuation of the reduction of the CNI, which, as I said, we agree with. It really is something that needs to be done. It should have been done years ago, and it's something that I think we can all support. Again, the budget process is simply that, a process. So the governor comes in with his ideas, his proposals, his spending request, if you will. And then over the next 3 or 4 weeks, as we go through our budget hearings, Chairman Harris and I will, with our committees, basically dig into what the governor has proposed. We'll look at everything that he has in there. We'll talk to the different departments and the various secretaries on, why they need this amount of money, what they're going to be using it for. Is it the right amount? And in some cases, you may look at where there's a request for more spending, and maybe it's not enough. Maybe we're not allocating enough money. And we see that in some cases in the human services budget, where we have to come back and do supplementals. So it really is a process. And we'll start here. The Governor Shapiro will start here, and we'll try to find somewhere where we can agree on that, in my opinion, meets the needs of the Commonwealth while also being responsible with taxpayer dollars.
Representative Harris, I want to talk a little bit more about the Delaware loophole and just give perhaps our viewers that are not in the business sector an understanding of what impact getting rid of the Delaware loophole would have on business and the economy in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, sure. You have businesses that are in Pennsylvania but establish themselves in Delaware. Okay, I'm gonna say that again. They're in Pennsylvania. They're doing business in Pennsylvania, but they're establishing themselves in Delaware. Literally, with some of these, it's like a PO box that they have in the state of Delaware. And the reason that they do that is so they can avoid paying certain taxes here in Pennsylvania. So listen, we're saying, look, we voted before, we being House Democrats, we voted before to reduce the CNI, the corporate income. We want to say to businesses, we want you to come here, and we're creating an environment, a tax friendly environment here for you to come. But we need to pair that with making sure that those who are doing business here in Pennsylvania are actually paying their fair share and not, skating their responsibility by having a PO box in another state and saying that they are incorporated in another state when they're actually right here in the state of Pennsylvania. That is important because it brings in more revenue to the state of Pennsylvania by closing that loophole, while also reducing the burden on everybody else. Because here's the thing: the businesses that do it right are actually taking on the burden for those who are taking advantage of this loophole.
Let's shift our focus now to energy. Just prior to the governor's budget address, he announced his lightning plan, his package of energy-related legislation. Representative Harris, what should our viewers know about that?
Well, I think, I agree with Representative Struzzi that um, energy is extremely important in Pennsylvania, right? And, and quite honestly, what we could be doing here in Pennsylvania is actually important to the nation with regards to our production here. And what the governor is looking to do is just really expand on that and get us in a better position to attract more folks and more businesses here. So, we are looking at every part of the governor's plan to ensure that um, it works for Pennsylvania, right? And that we, as the taxpayers, get to benefit. So, you know, um, we've been dealing with energy here in PA probably for the last 5 to 6 years, even before Governor Shapiro, and how to really harness that sector and make it grow in Pennsylvania.
Representative Struzzi, part of the governor's plan involves placing a cap on carbon emissions from power plants. Meanwhile, last week the Senate approved a bill that would repeal the state's participation in the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. Can you talk a little bit about that issue and where your caucus stands on it?
Well, certainly. I mentioned the greenhouse gas initiative earlier, and really, I think the irony is that the governor, with his lightning plan, is trying to solve a problem that the previous administration created, and he continues to push forward by appealing the court decision that Reggie, or the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, is in fact a tax, and only the General Assembly can create a tax. So I think that the governor can come up with all the plans he wants, but in reality, all he needs to do is stop pushing these policies that stifle energy production. If he would simply say, we're done with the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, I believe, and our caucus believes, and many believe, including the building trades and people who produce energy, that this industry will come back to Pennsylvania. It will grow in Pennsylvania because we have literally seen billions of dollars in investment go to other states like Ohio, West Virginia, and Texas that embrace energy production. So we know that these jobs and this industry will come back. I've seen it firsthand in Indiana County, just a few miles down the road. The Homer City Generating Station shut down a year and a half ago because of policies like the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. And I know people that I used to see at events that are now living in Texas working for the energy industry there because of policies like that. So I think the best thing the governor could do is simply stop with these policies that in fact aren't even necessary, because we know that we are already meeting the Clean Air Act standards. We're already meeting the goals of the climate Paris Accord. And so it really doesn't really solve anything. It doesn't do anything to affect global climate change by having these policies in Pennsylvania, but all it really does is stifle our ability to generate revenues from these industries.
Representative Harris?
Well, look, we we disagree on what the prior administration did. I think what the governor is doing, though, is making sure that it is clear that the executive branch has the authority to do what it has done. But look, we can move forward from revisiting what happened in the past. The bottom line is Governor Shapiro has put forth a plan around energy in Pennsylvania, and quite honestly, I think Pennsylvania needs to remain nimble with our energy plan, because we really don't know what's going to happen at the federal level, which could have tremendous impacts on what we're doing here in the state of Pennsylvania. So until it's clear, I think we need to continue to do what we're doing here.
Some of the governor's proposals encourage and incentivize hydrogen energy production in Pennsylvania. Under the new presidential administration, are the two projects that are slated to take place in Pennsylvania being threatened?
Well, that is a big part of what I'm saying. We
Hmm.
don't at this moment. I can't ascertain what that looks like, and that's why I think it's prudent for us to keep moving forward and being nimble in what we're doing because we have to know what the new administration at the federal level is going to do. Look, those projects are huge. I mean, like literally major for Pennsylvania. So we gotta see what shakes out in the new federal administration and how that affects us here.
Representative Struzzi, some of the governor's proposals also focus, in addition to hydrogen, they look at nuclear and incentivize renewables. How is natural gas faring in Pennsylvania, and particularly under these budget proposals?
I think we have an abundance of natural gas here in Pennsylvania, and we should really be maximizing the opportunities we have with natural gas. But again, I think there are incentives in place that don't always help move that forward. If you look at the grid right now, especially on cold winter days like this or hot summer days, your top three energy producers are nuclear, coal, and natural gas. Renewables like solar and wind are very, very small when you look at what is actually powering our grid. And so I think to incentivize renewables in some cases, and don't get me wrong, I understand that solar and wind have their place as well as other renewables, but we must make sure that we have that baseload energy that we need when that time comes. And so some of the policies that threaten that, I think, are not only bad for our revenues, but they're harmful for Pennsylvania. They're harmful for this nation because energy production is national security. We must be able to provide for our citizens. When they flip that switch, we have to make sure that the lights come on and that the heat is working. And so natural gas and to what Chairman Harris said, I think we do need to be nimble. I think that's a good word for it. But policies in place like we have right now are the exact opposite. They restrict our production. They restrict our ability to align with, I think we know where the federal administration is going to go. And it's going to be, natural gas. It's going to be fossil fuels. And we can do those in a clean way that provides the baseload energy that we need. And I think we can do that in unison with some of the environmental concerns. And as I said earlier, we've already been doing that. The power plant that was just down the road from here, they invested millions of dollars to produce coal-fired electric generation that was in compliance with clean air standards. So I think we can do both without shooting ourselves in the foot because we have that abundance of natural resources here that we should be taking advantage of.
The governor is seeking to create an independent board to speed up the permitting process for energy-related projects. What role does permitting play in our state's ability to help our energy sector thrive?
I think it plays and as we can move permitting along faster, it allows more investment in Pennsylvania. I think sometimes people who work in government don't think like business people. Energy production is a global market. So when you want to invest money in a business, you want to see those returns come quickly. And if you're waiting for months and months and months, which we have seen in the past here in Pennsylvania, just to put a shovel in the ground, you're going to go somewhere else. So permitting is fundamental as far as moving businesses forward. And we need to do that faster. We need to make sure that we're delivering those permits so these businesses, these global businesses want to invest in Pennsylvania, not go somewhere else where they can put a shovel in the ground before we can even get a permit issued.
I'd like to shift our focus to the governor's proposal. This would be a new revenue to legalize recreational marijuana in Pennsylvania. Representative Harris, we'll start with you. Where is this issue in the House this session?
Well, let me say, I'll answer that, but let me say this. I think we also need to point out that under the Shapiro administration, permitting has actually increased, and the speed that it takes to get permits for things done to conduct business in Pennsylvania has drastically been cut. I mean, I can't remember off the top of my head the amount of time, but the governor put this proposal out where if you didn't get your permit in a certain amount of time, you get a refund. I think the governor said since he's instituted that, only four have gotten a refund because the red tape is being cut in the Shapiro administration, and they've been doing a good job of making sure the permits get out, but also that the safety of the communities is still at hand and being considered. Like we can do permits fast, but we also got to make sure that the folks who are doing the work to make sure that the permit is done correctly, that the environment is going to be safe for the construction and the work that's going on. We also need to make sure that those things happen. So, you know, those things go hand in hand. As far as adult use cannabis, you know, we've been putting out legislation around adult use cannabis for a while now. You know, I've been very clear that I support the legalization of adult use cannabis, and we need to get it done here in Pennsylvania. Look, the bottom line is this: regardless of where you are on the issue, all of the states around us have done it. And when you talk to those states, a big part of their economy in recreational adult use cannabis is from Pennsylvania residents. So when you go to our friends in New Jersey and ask them, they'll tell you lots of Pennsylvanians are coming to New Jersey for adult use cannabis. If you go to New York, they'll tell you lots of their revenue is coming from Pennsylvanians with adult use cannabis. So you know what we're seeing, what we're looking at is putting together a proposal that legalizes adult use cannabis with safeguards to protect our children, to protect our citizens who don't want to have to walk through clouds of smoke when they're walking down the street. We understand that, but also taxes it so that we the taxpayers get to benefit from it, and you got to do it by making sure that you clean up the criminal records of those who were adversely affected by the war on drugs, which is nothing more than a war on people, as well as making sure that when you do licenses and when you do the business part of cannabis, that all people in Pennsylvania, regardless of race, color, and creed, can benefit and be a part of the process.
Representative Struzzi, this issue has received some bipartisan support. What kind of reaction are you hearing from other members of your caucus on this?
I think this debate about adult use recreational marijuana is something that we have to discuss, because I know a lot of people are in favor of it, a lot of people opposed. And I think that we have to really look at the social impacts of recreational marijuana. What concerns me are, human services is the largest chunk of our Pennsylvania state budget. And in other states, they have seen their social services demands increase because they have legalized recreational marijuana. It creates a whole host of other issues that can come that don't often get discussed. And that would be, I think, the major concerns. You're talking about workforce shortages here in Pennsylvania. How's it going to play out if you can't pass a drug test to go to work? It's still a Schedule I narcotic in the United States. And so those kind of things, I think, need to be discussed, need to be resolved before we go down the path of legalizing it for recreational use. If you really need it, you can get it medically. And I think you can get that for a number of reasons. I understand the argument on both sides, but I think the big concerns that I have are that it's going to create more harm than it does good on the social level, within families, within young people, within our workforce. And those are the kind of things I think we need to have a discussion about before we go down this path.
Let's give our
So
guests.
respectfully, I got to push back on my colleague. Alcohol is legal in Pennsylvania, and we sell it. We being the state. Alcohol is more dangerous than marijuana. So we got to have real, if we're going to have a conversation, we got to have real conversation. One, if we want to talk about what destroys family, it ain't going to be marijuana. It's alcohol. But we sell it, we tax it, and we benefit from it here in Pennsylvania. Number two, the young people that the chairman is talking about, I hate to tell you this, chairman, they're already smoking marijuana, and they're getting it many ways from sources where we can't tell if it's only marijuana and if it's not laced with something. So, legalizing adult use cannabis also makes sure that the marijuana that people are smoking is just marijuana. So, like, I just got to push back a little bit, because here's the thing: people that want marijuana, they're getting it. And if you look at the other states, they have not had any increase in their social services. They have not had any increase in negative effects. They have not seen what folks say would happen. It just hasn't happened because one, we already have medical here, and quite honestly, our medical system is set up where if you have chronic pain and you go to a doctor, they're going to give you a card. So like we gotta be serious about getting this done. Now, am I saying that there doesn't need to be safeguards? Yes, there needs to be safeguards, but we gotta some of the hyperbole. We gotta really look at the facts and the science behind it because marijuana is much more safer. Safer. Using that term a little loosely, but safer than the alcohol that we sell in our very own state stores that we own.
Let's give our guests a brief break while we look at what PCN is covering this week. Tomorrow on the PCN Capitol Preview, our guests will be the majority education chairs from the Pennsylvania House and Pennsylvania Senate. Representative Peter Schweier and Senator Linda Schlegel-Culver will be here tomorrow morning live at 9 a.m. The topic of On the Issues this week is the cost of electricity. Asim Huaq from PJM Interconnection joins us Wednesday at 7 p.m. Then right after that, Senator Tracy Pennycook has a proposal that would require Pennsylvanians to show identification every time they cast a vote. She'll explain Wednesday at 7:30. On Journalist Roundtable this week, our guests will be Boris Krauchniuk from WVIA, Kate Huangpu from Spotlight PA, and Justin Schweitzer from City and State Pennsylvania. They'll be here Thursday night at 7. Game of the week, high school basketball. Father Judge takes on St. Joe's Prep on Friday at 7 p.m. here on PCN. Coverage courtesy of the Sports Fan Base Network. The public affairs coverage you watch on PCN TV is now free of charge online. Go to PCNTV.com and check out our streaming service, PCN Select. PCN is Everything Pennsylvania. We're a 501c3 nonprofit television network that relies on viewers and donors like you to help support us. To make a donation, visit PCNTV.com. Let's get back into our discussion now about the state budget. We're looking at some of Governor Shapiro's proposals he laid out last Tuesday. Another proposed revenue is taxing and regulating skills games. First of all, I guess, Representative Harris, could you give us a brief explanation? What's the difference between playing skills games versus playing a slot machine in the casinos?
So some would say not a lot, but there is a difference in the sense that it's kind of in the term skill that there has to be some type of player-driven skill. I hate to keep using the name, but skill in playing these games. Here's the bottom line is that they're in Pennsylvania, they're legal in Pennsylvania, and right now they are unregulated and they're untaxed. So you can go to a bar and tavern that has one or two, and in some places you can go and see that there's a corner store that has set up a section in their store and have 5, 10, 15 in some places of these machines. Those machines are unregulated, and those machines aren't paying a tax to the Commonwealth. So for me, this is beyond the question of should we have them. This is a question of where we should have them, how many should be there, but more importantly, how much in tax revenue should we collect from this industry that is already here in Pennsylvania. So we are going to have that significant conversation because this is not tens of millions of dollars in revenue that we're missing out. It's hundreds of millions of dollars, as well as there is an argument that a portion of the revenue that we're not capturing is being taken away from the Pennsylvania Lottery Fund, which we know supports older Pennsylvanians. I think we all know that it's been drummed in our heads for decades about the Lottery Fund. But on a serious note, I think we have to reframe the conversation. It's not about if they're going to be here. I think the court has made that ruling. The question is where they should go, how will we regulate them, and how much we're going to tax them because we're missing out on hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue.
Representative Struzzi, do you see taxing skills games as a viable source of revenue?
Well, it's definitely something that we have to discuss. I think they do need to be regulated, and the points that Chairman Harris made are valid. It's not a level playing field right now for the video gaming terminals, the VGTs. And they want to see it regulated. The skills games folks say they want to see themselves regulated. I think it's something that has to occur in Pennsylvania because it's there. People use them. And if we're not regulating, we can't make sure that they're fair. And there is an opportunity, I believe, to get some revenue. And I think it's important that I think overall in the whole gaming picture across Pennsylvania, though, unless we regulate skills games, it's not fair to those who are regulated. So I agree with the points that Chairman Harris made. I think we need to have a real healthy discussion on this. I know it's been something that we've been talking about for several years now, but it really does need to occur. And I think if it doesn't occur, you're going to see the games that are regulated possibly not here. So it's something that has to occur.
Representative Harris, a moment ago you talked a little bit about the rate of taxing these if this bill were to pass. Senator Gene Yaw is advocating for a 16% tax on skills games. The governor's proposal calls for a tax closer to the 54% that casinos currently pay on their slot machines. I guess two-part question. How do you come to an agreement on what an appropriate level is, and is your caucus advocating for a particular rate at this time?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that there needs to be parity with what we're seeing in other of our gaming industry. But look, we're flexible with regards to what that number is going to look like when we have a final product. So there's no line in the sand for us on what that number is. We're flexible. But it needs regulation, I think, and I think that's the bigger point, and so we're ready to see where we can get 102 votes, 26 in the Senate, and the governor to agree with what that number looks like.
I'd like to shift our focus now to transportation. Representative Struzzi will come to you next. Governor Shapiro proposed shifting part of the sales tax to benefit transit funding. Would this be a tough sell for lawmakers that represent more rural regions of the state as opposed to perhaps the big cities that have larger mass transit agencies like SEPTA or like in Pittsburgh?
Well, I think it's something that, again, we're going to have to discuss. Clearly, there are needs out there, and we understand that. Public transportation is important in all corners of the Commonwealth, here in rural Pennsylvania, as well as in your big cities, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh. So we do appreciate the need. The amount of funding, though, is what concerns, I think, a lot of us, and the accountability that comes with that. Shifting another 1.7% of the sales and use tax would bring it to about 10%, I believe, that goes to public transportation. That's a significant amount of money from the sales and use tax. We're talking, I believe the number is about 290 million that would shift to public transportation. And in last year's budget, we allocated 80 million from the general fund. Then the governor and his administration shifted another 80 million or so from some federal transportation infrastructure improvement projects. So 160 million in this fiscal year, now proposing another 290 million or so in the next budget cycle. I think it's a lot of money. And I think my concern, a lot of our concern from our colleagues is, what is that money being used for? How is it being used? How did we get to this state where we need this much money to salvage our public transportation networks? And what are we doing to ensure that we don't continue to have these challenges with these entities? Again, I appreciate that there's a need out there for public transportation, and people benefit all across the Commonwealth in a rural, urban, suburban. But how are we utilizing these funds? How do we get to this point? And how are we going to make sure that it's more efficient in the future?
Representative Harris.
Yeah, so I would agree. I'm okay with looking at efficiencies. I'm okay with making sure that the dollars and cents are being invested in our public transit system correctly. I think the only thing I would differ in saying is that one, we're not salvaging the public transit systems in Pennsylvania. Those systems do work and take people to work every single day across Pennsylvania. I think the other thing is this is not a nice to have. This is a must have. Let me be very clear. If people in Pittsburgh, in Allegheny County, and people in Philadelphia and the whole Southeast, and even in the middle in Lancaster and Reading, if folks can't get on mass transit to go to work, Pennsylvania doesn't work. And that's just a fact. A lot of the resources that is generated from the Southeast, from people who get on mass transit every single day, people in Allegheny County who get on mass transit every single day, is the same dollars and cents that's used to fix roads and bridges in Cameron County, Elk County, Pike County, and many rural places across Pennsylvania that those people who are using mass transit will never see, will never use. That is the whole concept of a commonwealth, is that we don't sit there and say, and I'm not saying the chairman is saying this, but we don't sit there and say, well, this doesn't affect me or my part, well, so I'm not going to support it. No, it's like, this is all about, what is good for the whole state. Also, a lot of the parts, materials, trains that are used in our mass transit system, they're built in many of our rural parts of Pennsylvania. We're sending tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars across Pennsylvania to build widgets and parts that go and are used in our mass transit system. So we have to be very clear and direct. Mass transit is not a nice to have. It is a must have. And if it comes to a grinding halt in Pennsylvania, so does the workers, so does our economy.
Let's shift our focus to education. Now, Representative Harris, will come back to you. What do you think of the governor's proposal for an additional $526 million adequacy payment to Pennsylvania's poorest schools? What do you think about that dollar amount?
I think it's court ordered. I mean, you have a Commonwealth Court ruling that says how we funded Pennsylvania's schools is unconstitutional. So I think we have to, as a Commonwealth, continue to make the significant investments that are necessary so that we meet our constitutional mandate. Big part of that constitutional mandate is around the formula that we're going to use to send money to schools that have been underfunded for so long. But not only that, those schools that are being underfunded, I think folks at home need to understand, when the state does not pay the bill for your local schools turn around and raise taxes to pay for it. I'm gonna say that again. When we don't foot the bill like we're supposed to, like we're constitutionally mandated, when we don't do that, those schools are forced to turn around and go to local taxpayers and have them foot the bill. Somebody's going to pay for it. It's either going to get paid at the state level where we have the resources to do it, or it's going to come out of grandma's pocketbook with school taxes at the local level. And so last year, we made a significant investment that was right in line with the BEFC, the Basic Education Funding Commission's plan. We need to continue to make those investments. And here's the thing. When we don't make those investments, we pay for it 5, 10, 15 years down the line. We're paying for it now when you have crumbling infrastructure for our schools. This is not just an urban issue. This is an urban, suburban, and rural issue. I've crisscrossed the state of Pennsylvania, and I can tell you that there are schools falling down all over in blue counties, in red counties, and rural counties, and in our urban epicenters. These schools are falling apart, and our young people are going to these schools that are falling apart, and their teachers are teaching in schools that are falling apart. And that's because of the disinvestment that we've seen. We need to continue on the pathway making those investments, because we're either going to pay for it now in our schoolhouse, or we'll pay for it later in one of our other departments.
Representative Struzzi?
I think we can all agree that every child deserves to have a great education here in Pennsylvania, no matter where they live. It's a question of how those educational services are delivered and how much they cost. It's a significant every year that we're making in education, and those costs have not gone down. Every year we invest millions and millions in education. I think the question is, how are those funds being used? Are they being used in the right manner to properly educate each child? Because children learn differently. And I think, the school choice issue is something that has to be discussed. We need to look at that again in every area of the Commonwealth, because children, even here in rural Pennsylvania and in the urban areas, they learn differently. So we need to make sure that, yes, we have to have a discussion about funding education, but I want to make sure that those funds are being used properly in the most efficient way to educate children properly and give them the most opportunity that they can have here in this Commonwealth. So that discussion, I think, is going to be a big part of these upcoming budget hearings. It's a lot of money, again, and we're talking about taxpayer dollars. And Chairman Harris is right. You know, if they don't have the funds that they need to meet their budgets at the local level, property taxes make up that difference. But the question is, what is the right level in each school district? Are we using these state funds appropriately? Are we using them in the most efficient manner to deliver the best education for our students? And I think there needs to be some accountability, again, in education funding. We can't simply throw money at problems and think they're going to solve themselves.
Representative
The chairman
Struzzi,
gets
I'm
the
sorry, go
chairman
ahead.
gets no chairman gets no argument out of me on accountability. I think I 100% agree with him that we need to be accountable for every single dollar that we're spending in our education system and making sure that we're getting the best results and making sure that our children that we're seeing the significant outcomes that we need to see for each and every child. So we agree on the fact that when we make these significant investments, that we should be able to see results. No disagreement there.
Representative Struzzi, a moment ago you talked about school choice. Just briefly, do you anticipate perhaps your caucus may bring up either the issue of school vouchers once again or further expansion of the EITC, the Educational Improvement Tax Credit?
I think that'll be part of the budget discussions. You know, we're just starting the process. It's been a week since the governor gave his proposal. I think that it's going to take some time for us to truly dissect how these funds will be used, what I think components, you know, we're going to advocate for, what components that the administration is going to advocate for, what components that, you know, the Senate, House Democrats, we're all going to have to come together ultimately, hopefully by June 30th, to reach some agreement. So I think all these different issues that you hear discussed will be part of those ongoing negotiations. The first thing for Chairman Harris and I is the budget hearings coming up in a week or so. You know, that's where we'll really dig into this and we'll see what's important, you know, where we need to allocate resources, where we can maybe roll things back a little bit. And to me, that's exciting. I think that the budget hearings are 3 weeks of real intense discussions, real intense questioning, where we really learn what is at the heart of these budget proposals. And I think, you know, everything's on the table right now. And as we weed through that, as we go through this next few weeks or so, you know, we're going to find out what's really important.
Representative Harris, I'm going to give you the last word. Representative Struzzi just referred to the budget hearings that are about to take place starting next week. What happens between now and June 30th to get this budget to the finish line?
A lot. We will do budget hearings starting next week. We got to get through Friday first. And if you don't know what Friday is, it's the parade for the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles, just in case you didn't know. Anyway, we will start our budget hearings next week, where we'll have the different departments come before the committee, and members of the Appropriations Committee will get an opportunity to do a deep dive into each department and their requests, and quite honestly, find out what those resources are going to be used for. After that, after we gather all that information and gather all that data, that's when the real conversations start between House and Senate and the governor, you know, to begin to actually craft the document. I believe sometime maybe 2-3 weeks after the budget hearings are done, I will actually formally introduce the budget documents legislatively. And then the real work begins for us trying to find common ground around what the numbers look like, where the numbers should go, and how we craft this moral document. In my view, I believe budgets are moral documents. I believe they outline our priorities, and so hopefully, prayerfully, we'll be able to get that done by June 30th.
Our guests have been House Appropriations Chairs, Representatives Jordan Harris and Jim Struzzi. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Go Birds.
Earlier, PCN spoke with Representative Dane Watrow about his legislation to require cursive writing to be taught in schools.
Welcome to our program. You're sponsoring a bill that would require cursive handwriting to be taught in the classroom. Why do you think learning cursive is so important?
It teaches fundamentals, motor skills, brain activation. There's a whole host of reasons why cursive writing is so very important. Just to go back, I remember when I was in grade school, second and third grade, when we got to that point of learning cursive, we felt the sense of getting older, pride, and it just drove us to a different level. We wanted to get there, we wanted to do it, and I just think it's super important. It needs to be brought back in the classroom. There are so many teachers doing it right now in the Commonwealth. And I really, truly believe that we got to get everybody back on board teaching this skill that is very useful. Let's face it, we're faced with having to sign our name, read cursive, probably on a daily basis. And unfortunately, as the years go on, our children are not knowing how to read it and or write it.
How did we get away from teaching cursive writing?
That's a great question. I don't know. I believe when they had the standards and they came up with standards, I want to say back in I believe the 90s, but don't quote me on that. The standards did not require cursive writing in here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
So your bill, 1934, what specifically would it require?
It's House Bill 17 this legislative session, and it's 4 simple words. And I kept it simple. That way, sometimes when we have bills drafted in Harrisburg, it's lost because it's convoluted with so many different things. And by no mistake, this bill has 4 words that are super important. And that's cursive writing, italics, and writing. So with those 4 words, I cannot see this not getting to the finish line. I'm very happy to report to you that I met with some members of the PSEA yesterday, and they are taking this bill, House Bill 17, back to their membership February 21st. I'm not a guy that likes to rush time, but this is something I'm going to be very patiently or impatiently waiting for that date to come to see if those members will be behind such a great bill. And I say it's a great bill because I just feel it's going to be a foundation for our kids moving forward.
Now you mentioned that there have been previous bills that have covered this. Why weren't they discussable before?
I could tell you 2 years ago is when I first took office, and my colleague of mine, Joe Adams, Representative Joe Adams from Wayne Pike County area, he introduced this bill. Unfortunately, Representative Adams had to resign due to severe family issues at home with his loved ones, and he wanted to be at home and care for them. And I asked Representative Adams if I could go ahead and take that bill and spearhead it, because when he had that bill, I thought it was so super important, and I promised him I would not let that bill die. And I'm trying to lead that charge to get this bill across the finish line. My wife she was a second grade teacher up until this year, and she moved on to a different position. However, she tells me, and we discussed this many a times, of how important it is that she taught this in her classroom and how the kids reacted. They felt a sense of leadership, a sense of pride, and to run out of that school building to their parents that are waiting for them or on that school bus with that first page of them writing cursive is just super rewarding for them. Cognitive benefits, another positive thing. There's a whole list of positive things that happens with writing cursive, as we all know.
If the bill passes, how soon would it be required to be implemented?
So my bill, I'm open for discussion. However, I'm thinking that immediately would be great. However, in the next calendar school year is absolutely fine. Gives everybody time to adjust. I want to work closely with PSEA and PDE. I have a phone call into PDE. Unfortunately, yesterday I placed that phone call. Me personally wanted to speak with them. I have not heard back from them, but hoping to gain their support on this bill as well. And this isn't, and I'm not the type of guy that say I want it done today. If it has to wait till next school calendar year, that's absolutely fine. That makes sense to make sure we have the curriculum in place and the foundation set to move forward.
Are there other states that have these types of requirements?
That's a great question. Yeah, there are many states that have these requirements. There are 26 states right now in this nation that has cursive as a mandatory curriculum in their educational system. And I don't want to be the last one here. I want to get Pennsylvania back in that mix too of leading the way. Our education system's top notch here. I truly believe that, and they're doing a great job. And I think adding this in there is just another component of going in the right direction.
What's the next step for this bill?
Hopefully be brought up in committee meeting. I did have a great conversation with our my friend across the aisle there, the majority chair, and he is working diligently too to see about gaining support for this, and if there is support for it. And I just think this is bipartisan. It would have to be brought up for committee, and then from committee it'll be presented to the House floor, where I'm hoping at that point the good majority leader will bring that up for a vote.
Representative Dane Watrow, Republican from Luzerne and Schuylkill counties, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
That concludes today's show. The PCN Capitol Preview returns tomorrow to discuss education with Senate Education Committee Majority Leader Senator Linda Schlegel-Culver and House Education Committee Majority Leader Representative Peter Schweier. That's tomorrow morning, starting live at 9 a.m. I'm Francine Schertzer. Thank you for watching.